Yes, I was stupid.
Well, if you got a dollar, well, just lousy down. Know that I got rhythm that could suit your budget fine.
Hi, this is Patrick with Trusty Huckster Mercantile. Welcome to my channel, and welcome to my first collaboration. Today is October 1st, and the month of October celebrates my 1-year anniversary for vintage reselling. I opened my Etsy store on October 6th. I didn't start doing YouTube videos until November, so my 1-year anniversary for YouTube is coming up a little bit later. But for the month of October, I wanted to do some special things to celebrate my anniversary, and one of them is my first collaboration. So as I had announced previously, all resellers, watchers, viewers, collectors, anybody who hears about it is welcome to post a video into my playlist, Trusty's Vintage Firsts. You can find the playlist in my YouTube channel. And if you can't figure out how to post it, send me the link in email or comments, and I will post it for you, because admittedly I'm having a little trouble figuring out how to do it. But hey, we're all here to learn together, and appreciate anyone who wants to participate. So to start things off, I'm going to do my own video and covering my own vintage firsts. I hope people come up with some creative definitions and creative interpretations of this theme of the Trusty's Vintage Firsts. Mine's a little bit more traditional, and I'm just going to showcase a couple of items, actually 3 items, that I thought was a good representation just of me, what I'm doing in my channel, and just, the spirit of vintage firsts. And one of them is a combination item that I picked up on my first trip out of the country. Well, not technically. I guess I'd been to Canada and Mexico before that. So my first trip outside of North America. In college, I was a Russian area studies minor. And one of the opportunities I had in the late 80s was to travel to the Soviet Union. And it was the Soviet Union at that point. And one of the things we did, the group that I was with, was be stupid, because that is what you do in college. And I'm horrified as I think back on these days and look at my daughter going through that same age range, basically now. But one of the things that I did was, if you think back into, this was in 1989, was when I did this trip. It was still the Soviet Union, but things were starting to loosen up. It was glasnost, perestroika, Gorbachev, all that kind of stuff. So things were changing. There was definitely a knowledge and an interest of the West. And one of the things that we were well aware of as we were going as college students was the idea of the black market. So one of the things that I did was invite a complete stranger into my hotel to trade me a pair of blue jeans for a Russian lacquer box. So this is the first vintage piece that I picked up on my first trip outside of North America. And it is a lacquer box. It, by definition, is vintage now because it took place in 1989. But at the time, it probably had a little bit of age to it even at that point. And one of the things that we were being educated on as we were preparing for the trip was to be on the lookout for, the types of collectibles, the type of souvenirs, things that we may want to bring back from this trip. And one of the things that we were told about were these lacquer boxes. As a Russian area studies minor, I knew a little bit of Russian. I could read the Cyrillic alphabet. I cannot do it to the level of Greg at Blue Feather Mercantile as much as he tries to test me. But I knew a little bit more of it at that time. And one of the things that they taught us was that Polyek was one of the regions that was basically known at that time for being the highest quality lacquer box producer. They were made pretty much throughout Russia and throughout the Soviet Union, but certain areas just were basically better known and tended to have better quality artists. And so one of the things that's come up in some live sales, some videos, George has covered some of this in some of his shop along videos, is lacquer boxes are not necessarily rare. They show up in the West quite a bit because people like me were stupid and traded a pair of Wrangler blue jeans to bring this home. But one of the things that's different about lacquer boxes that are still being produced today is that sometimes the region and the artists who are painting them, people are much more aware of it. And particularly with the internet, people have the more ability to do research. For those of you who are not of a certain age, in 1989, we did not have the internet, or at least not the version of the internet that we have now. So being able to know what was good, what was bad, was really, kind of word of mouth, a little bit from books and from just general knowledge. And because of that, and I may have to do a separate photo insert for this because it doesn't want to focus. When pieces were signed back in the day, they were signed as pieces of art. They were signed, but they weren't obviously signed. I mean, it's obvious in the sense that clearly it's not like it's hidden in the foliage or anything. But if you look at lacquer boxes made today, because again, these are still being made, the lettering of what they are, even though it's still many times, sometimes it's not, but many times it's still in the Cyrillic alphabet, the lettering is massive. You don't need a magnifying glass, you don't need anything. Even an old person doesn't need their cheaters, because it's basically advertising the fact of where these things were made. So when you see the handwriting that's very, very small, one, you'll actually kind of get it's kind of one hint that it is an older piece. But the word polyak is the best way. Again, I'll try and do a close-up of it. But if you don't know the Cyrillic alphabet, the P sound, the P, looks like the Greek letter for pi. So the little two dashes with a little hat on top of it. So if you're ever seeing a piece and you can't figure out how to read it, you look for the last set of words. Usually it's only one word because of the city, but sometimes it's two. If it's a shorter word with only 5 letters and the first one looks like the letter pi, it's possibly got a polyak box. Each of them hold a story. Admittedly, I do not know what story this is. I probably could try and translate, and maybe once upon a time I did know what it said. But that doesn't matter. At this point, it's simply a lacquer box that is pretty much, I have a couple of things that are left from that trip that I still have, but this by far is my favorite item from it. One, because of the story of how stupid I was to get it. But I will give you a secondary story. I do have it somewhere, but it's in a box. I basically smuggled a Soviet flag out of the country. It was illegal to do so, so I folded that flag up, draped it on either side of my pant legs, and walked through customs with it. Yes, I was stupid. But I did it, and I now have a Soviet hammer and sickle flag. But anyway, this is the one that's actually out on display. This is the one I'm happy with, proud of, and this I thought was a really good representation. I wasn't really into vintage at that time, but as you look back on things, this is really one of those pieces that I think it tells a great story. Another item I wanted to highlight, for people who are familiar with my channel, if you're paying really close attention, you will notice something is wrong with the backdrop of of this video. Something is missing, and that item that's missing is right over my shoulder. There's usually another piece of salt glazed pottery there, and the reason it's no longer there is because it is now standing right in front of me, and this is my first piece of salt glazed pottery that I purchased specifically to build up this collection. I will say the piano came first. So when we moved into the house, at the time I was married, we moved into our house when our daughter, the Huckster helper, was 5. Yes, 5. She was about to start first grade. And so we built the house from scratch. We had a lot of furniture from our old house that we brought from Maryland. But because we were coming from Maryland, we didn't bring everything with us. So we had this opportunity to basically get a lot of new furniture to fill the house. And one of the areas that I was trying to fill was that was the days, and they still exist, but that was the days we built the house with a formal living room. And this piano was one of the items that I found, fell in love with, and was specifically designed to go into a nook that was within that living room. So that I have this massive vertical grand piano, I needed something to go above it. And I wanted something that seemed somewhat age appropriate. The piano itself is built in 1920, so this is its 100th birthday this year. But so I could have gone 20s, but there was nothing about this that spoke deco to me. The legs, and you can kind of see on the pillars on the side a little bit, there's a little bit of angularity, but there's nothing about this that screams deco. It just happened to be made in 1920. So when I was trying to find something that looked good with it, it was at an antique show that I found this. And I thought this was the start of a beautiful friendship. So I picked this up from A Bird in Hand Antiques. I still have their card. I don't know if they still exist. They're in Florham Park, New Jersey, of all places. But it's a Bird in Hand Antiques, Joyce and Ron Basson. Still have the card. It sits inside the crock because as much as I've collected other pieces of crockery, I knew at the time I was never going to remember what this was, and I would never remember why I paid so much for it. So it was at an antique show. It was fully vetted. And what this is, it is a Northern Shenandoah Valley, Virginia, circa 1830 to 1850. So again, this was one of the first pieces that I purchased. Beautiful piece, definitely one of my pride pieces, for the top. It's not one of my largest. It sits in the front because it's actually one of the smaller ones. And so the rest of them I built up over time, and at no point have I spent anywhere near what I spent for this one. So this is kind of the special one in the collection. It maybe is the most valuable. At this point, I don't even keep up necessarily with the values of them. I buy them for their size and their appearance. I do like the ones that have more of the bluish gray background as opposed to the ones that have more of the tan background. But the tans go a little bit nicer with the piano. The ones with the blue go well with the painting, or it's actually a silk screen. It's in the back that was made in 1970 by a Wittenberg professor, and I went to Wittenberg University. And so that's always been with me since I was at school. There's some blues in that. So I like to kind of mix it up a little bit. So that's a little bit more contemporary, 1920 piano, and then the salt glazed stoneware. So all of the stoneware that I have, with only one or two exceptions, are all 19th century stoneware. This one I have more of the provenance on and the specifics. Some of the other items are stamped, some are not stamped. Someday I'd love to do a tour of them, but before I give you a video tour, I kind of have to know what I have myself. But this was the first, so that's why it becomes part of the Vintage Firsts video. And then the last item I wanted to cover was something that really more represents a more modern time, contemporary, basically it's more recent. The very first item I ever sold when I started my reselling business, when I started my shop on Etsy, the shop opened on October 6th. I was filling the shop for probably about a month. I think it was open for almost 2 months before I pulled the trigger to make it live. And in that time, I was, buying inventory, trying to figure out how to do photographs, researching prices, and just kind of deciding what my store was going to be. Because it's Etsy, if you're not really, totally into the online reselling community, Etsy has a little bit of different rules than eBay, in the sense that Etsy is, in many cases, it's known as more of a maker space for someone who's making their own pieces, but they do have a vintage component, but the requirement is everything has to be older than 20 years. So as I was building up my Etsy business, I was really trying to curate a collection of items that would go in and be representative, but a lot of times I wasn't 100% sure how old something was. And this item kind of falls into the gap. Now you're going to be wondering, well, wait a minute, how can you talk about the first item you sold on Etsy, why you wouldn't have it? Well, I don't. I no longer have this item. However, anytime I see it again, I pick it up and I resell it. So what they are cowrie shell napkin ring holders. I usually carry napkin rings in my shop in some way, but anytime I can find the cowrie shells, I definitely pick them up, because the very first item I ever sold was a set of a dozen of these cowrie shell napkin rings. At the time I picked them up, I still remember I bought them at a Goodwill. I believe it was in Iowa, but I know it was a Goodwill, and they were $2.99 for the set of 12 cowrie shell napkin rings. And as I looked up their history on WorthPoint, on eBay, looked to see what they were selling for on Etsy, I was shocked at what kind of prices they were getting. And in hindsight, I probably sold them for too little. I sold the set of 12 for $30. They were worth far more than that. But at the beginning, I wanted to make sure things sold, and and to this day, I really have no interest in sitting on inventory for years on end just to get the right price. In my opinion, the right price, or what it's worth, is what somebody's willing to pay, and that somebody's willing to pay within a couple weeks or months. It basically is, people have to find it. So I now have this set of, this one happens to be a set of 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 cowrie shells. So it's a little bit of a smaller set, but the exact same look, same color, same style, same design. I will probably end up listing this smaller set. This will probably end up going on Etsy for that same price, probably for 30 bucks. Haven't listed them yet because I wanted to have them for the video, but this is just kind of an item that, again, it's something I like to carry because there is that memory of the very first thing I ever listed on Etsy. So those are my vintage firsts. I could have gone into a much longer video. Didn't particularly feel like I wanted to do that because I really want to get to see what all of you are doing. So if you just learned about this challenge, it is not too late to participate. Throughout the month of October, if you create a vintage first video, hashtag it Trusty's Vintage Firsts, Trusty's Vintage Firsts. I'll type in what hashtag I'm using. Sorry. But put that into your hashtag, drop me a note, give me the link, see if you can post it into my playlist. My playlist will go live with this video in it on Thursday, October 1st at 1 p.m. Eastern. If you can figure out how to post before that, well, you'll have already done that before you see this video, so it doesn't really matter. But if you're watching this video and you haven't figured out how to post it, drop me a note. Or now that it's your video is live and my playlist is live, I think it might be easier for you to do so. The playlist is set up to be collaborated with, so you can participate. But if you have questions, go ahead and reach out to me. And I hope we get a variety. I hope people came up with some creative interpretations of what the vintage firsts are. And I can't wait to see all the videos, and I hope all of you watch the videos and maybe find some other YouTubers that share some content, share some of the same aesthetic that maybe you have, and you'll find some new content that you want to watch going on into the future. So thank you very much for watching my video. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you for putting your trust in Trusty Huckster. Bye-bye.
Well, show me a sign if you're wishing me to stay. Otherwise, I say goodbye, finish out the day. And that sunrise in the morning and you got nothing to say. Oh, that's when I'll be headed on my way. Hey, hey, I hope I can abide by your area codes, and I'm bound to wander down that endless road. Give me a good deal on something I can use. Make me an offer that I just can't refuse. When that sunrise in the morning and there's nothing there to do, will probably be the last time I see you. Woo-hoo! I hope I can abide by your area code, and I'm bound to wander down that endless road. Well, if I had a dime for every time I felt this way, you know I'd have $1 million and a couple bucks in change. Sure was nice to know you. Oh, maybe I'll catch you on the New York train. Or maybe I'll never see your face again.